It's so good to see you. I mean, to the extent we can see you. All right, Kelly, and looking for Carrie. Doesn't look like Carrie's on with us.
I'm on.
Oh, you're on? Okay. All right. It is 11 o'clock. I'm going to suggest that we start. Couple of housekeeping things before we jump in. We do record this meeting, and we also get a transcript that helps with the meeting minutes. So you know that we are recording this. If you are on the phone and you are muted, *6 will get you off of mute. I can mute all of you, but I cannot unmute anybody. So if the background noise gets a little punchy, I'll mute things. If you're online, it's your microphone icon that you toggle on and off. If you're on the phone, *6 will get you in the game. As we go through today, if you wish to speak, the chat is your friend. That is the fastest way to tell me you have something to say. And I'll keep a queue there. You can follow along sort of who's next in line to speak. I will check in periodically with the folks on the phone. I have not yet figured out how to tell if their hands are raised. So periodically I'll just check in with you on the phone if you have something that you would like to contribute. So with that, Stan, I'm going to pull up your slide and we will get this show on the road.
Great, thank you. So good morning and welcome to the January 2022 Hampton Advisory Board meeting. My name is Stan Branch. I am the Deputy Designated Federal Officer for the Hampton site. As a reminder, this meeting will be conducted in accordance with the requirements of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Advisory committees have played an important role in shaping programs and policies of the federal government. The Hampton Advisory Board's role provides policy-level advice and recommendations concerning the following EM-specific issues, such as cleanup activities and environmental restoration, waste and nuclear materials management and disposition, excess facilities, future land use and long-term stewardship, risk management, and communications. I appreciate your attendance today and look forward to the Hampton Advisory Board's development and submission of constructive, actionable policy-level advice on the Hampton cleanup. Thanks again for your presence today and look forward to a constructive meeting. Thank you. Back to you, Ruth.
Thank you, Stan. So as you join us, if you would type in your name and your affiliation in the chat, that's the other way we keep track of who's at the meeting so that we've got that documentation that we need to make for each meeting. So it also ensures that we spell your name and your organization's name correctly.
Tony Brooks, I'm on.
Tony, good to hear your voice. All right.
Good to have a voice.
Steve, you want to talk about welcome and ground rules for how we're going to get through today?
Sure. I want to welcome everybody and thank you very much for participating. This can be probably a pretty important meeting. It's an unusual meeting for us in that our primary purpose is to hear from the agencies on the plans for the next membership package. There will be an opportunity for conversation and questions. I'd particularly like everybody to listen to what is said, and when you have questions, please get in the queue rather than typing your questions or comments in the chat. I don't have access to the chat, and I particularly want everybody to hear your questions. So please use that venue for getting in the queue and verbally asking your questions or comments. And we're going to learn some stuff that I don't know, so I'm going to be listening very closely to what's said. And And please be respectful. If you hear something you don't like, and that's likely to happen, as often is the case, please respect the people who are presenting and respect each other. Thank you.
All right. So let me pull up the agenda. So here's the plan. We just did the opening. We're going to talk about the HAB membership packet for 2022 and 2023. The meeting's about 2.5 hours. So at about noon, we'll take a break because in my experience, people can't sit still for 2.5 hours. So we will choreograph that in. Carrie and Kelly are going to share some stuff about the membership packet. The bulk of the meeting then becomes your discussion, your questions, your comments, and we have a little bit at the end for board business if it turns out that we need to tackle anything in terms of board business. We've got about 6 or 7 folks on the phone. I will check with you after DOE shares the information to see if any folks on the phone have a desire to jump in the queue and share their thoughts as well. Are there any questions about today's agenda? It's kind of straightforward and short. Okay, I clearly needed to make more coffee for you. Steve, are there any announcements before we jump in?
I don't believe so.
Anybody have any announcements we need to make before we turn it over to Carrie and Kelly? All right, so let me pull this up. Apologize, the document sharing is a little cumbersome today.
Thanks, Ruth. So if you can go to the next slide, please.
Come on. Sorry. There you go.
All right, so we want to talk with you guys a bit today about the membership recruitment and nomination package. So we'll talk about that. We want to discuss the MOU that was signed in 2008 between EPA, Ecology, and DOE. And basically, we want you to take this information and use it as you go forward and recruit members or potential members to fill seats. Next slide. So pretty much I already just covered this. The MOU is between DOE, EPA, and Ecology, and it's centered largely on the convening report in that it names the represented seats, and it includes mention of public interest seats, tribal, and labor. So next slide. So as a reminder, our intergovernmental seats, we've got Benton County, Franklin, and Grant counties, that's 1 seat. Kennewick, Pasco, Richland, West Richland, the Benton-Franklin Council of Governments, TRIDEC, the HAMTEC, Hanford Atomic Metal Trades Council, the Central Washington Building and Construction Trades Council, the Confederated Tribes of the Yakima Indian Nation, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, the Nez Perce Tribe, the Governor of Oregon, Oregon State Agency that has the lead role for Hanford Cleanup, which is the Oregon Department of Energy, and then the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board. Next slide. We have specific interest groups. So we have 3 seats to represent the Hanford workforce. We have 1 seat to represent local environmental interests, which I think in the current package is the Rod and Reel Club. And then we've got 5 seats for regional citizen, environmental, and public interest organizations with an active interest in Hanford cleanup issues. We've got 1 seat for local regional public health concerns, 2 seats for regional universities, and then 10 seats for public at large. Next slide. Okay, so that's the MOU. Before I move on, any questions about any of that?
Yeah, this is Bob Seelam.
Bob?
That MOU was signed back, I don't know how many years ago.
2008.
Has it been modified to include the additional public at large seats?
It has not yet, and that is something that that we have talked about. We just haven't done it yet.
Okay, because I'm kind of leading the effort on the process manual, and we need to update that, probably in conjunction with the MOU, since they both have to go back to headquarters to be approved.
That's a good point. So thank you for that.
So Roberto Armijo from EPA has put a link to the MOU in the chat for those of you who want to find it. I've got Tom Cecilia in queue, and then I want to check with the folks on the phone in case they have questions. Tom?
Yeah, on the same lines of what Bob was talking about, just to clarify, I think the MOU says no more than 4 public at large seats as it's currently written.
Right, we know it does. We know we have to update it, so.
All right. Do we have anybody on the phone who has a question at this point? All right.
All right.
Carrie, more information.
Thanks. So I think, over the last, I would say 18 months, we've talked a lot about the importance of inclusion and increasing the diversity in our boards. And that was what really drove us to add the additional public at large seats. You guys all know well that the Hanford Advisory Board is a very important organization, and the department's public engagement and its outreach. So you guys really help us maintain awareness of the site cleanup, the mission, the progress, keeping community stakeholders informed, providing those stakeholders a voice in the mission as you bring their input back to us. And well, the HAB is chartered under the Federal Advisory Committee Act. It's also part of the EM Site Specific Advisory Board. Yes, so there's 7 other boards across the nation. All of our boards are intended to draw upon diverse viewpoints from the affected local communities, and then provide that policy level advice back, in our case, to the tri-party agencies. As we continue to move forward, DOE is seeking to increase diversity in its boards and in the HAB to ensure that the local communities and tribal nations most impacted by Hanford cleanup activities, that they have a voice in that cleanup. And so as part of this effort, DOE plans to ensure that the HAB term limits are applied consistent with the EMSSAB charter and the other 7 local advisory committees that make up the EMSSAB. So, really what we're looking to do is ensure that exceptions that we grant to the term limits don't hinder DOE's ability to provide opportunities for new participants. And this is all consistent with the FACA, as well as the existing MOU that we have and the Biden administration priorities and the executive orders that have recently been put out that are really focused on promoting diversity and inclusivity and public participation across the administration's federal missions. So we talked a little bit about last year, we added the additional 6 public at large seats, which really brought our primary board members to 37 seats on the HAB. And those 37 seats include 15 designated organizations, 12 interest-specific seats, and then 10 public at large seats. Okay. The 15 MOU designated organizations, the ones that have a standing seat on the HAB, you guys, those entities can keep requesting term limit exceptions without going through some thorough recruitment process for a new representative. Exception requests can be requested, and they're granted by the Assistant Secretary of Energy for Environmental Management, or their designee, referred to by us as EM1. And while they can be requested, they're not guaranteed. They've never been guaranteed, though. For the interest-specific and the public at large seats, the site office, our office, can request a term limit exception, but only after a thorough recruitment effort has been taken to find new candidates or new applicants, and there are no viable candidates identified. So we'll have to submit documentation outlining all of those recruitment efforts with the exception request to be considered. And again, those exception requests are granted at the discretion of the it's acting right now, but at the discretion of the Assistant Secretary of Energy or their designee, and they're not guaranteed. As we go forward, the other thing on that is it's not limited to just those interest groups who are currently serving. It can be others or new ones as well. So, sorry. DOE is very, very appreciative of the long-standing service of so many of our HAB members. And we want to continue to benefit from their knowledge and their experience and expertise as they participate as members of the public. And we hope will continue to help advance recruitment efforts and get new people up to speed. We're remaining engaged with our tri-party agencies with EPA and Ecology. And, you know, again, the focus is really on positioning the HAB to represent those diverse views and perspectives that are really necessary to support development of well-informed and actionable policy level advice. So before I open to questions, I wanted to see if Kelly, if you would like to say anything. I saw you came on screen, so.
Hi, good morning, everyone. No, everything that Carrie said is what I also echo. We do appreciate the HAB immensely for all of your work that you have done throughout the years, and we look forward to having and continuing this wonderful relationship with the Hanford community. I'm here to answer any questions that you have from a headquarters perspective, and I want you to know that you are valued, and we look forward to continuing a positive relationship.
So I have not, I can't see the chat, but I'll leave it to Ruth to let me know who has questions.
All right, so our habit here with the HAB is before we open to questions, we usually check in with our regulators, Washington State Department of Ecology and U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. David Bowen.
Before you start, Ruth, I just want to say I'm so sorry. I was remiss in asking if they would like to add. So my apologies to David and Dave.
Yes, we have David twice. David Bowen.
Thanks, Ruth and Carrie. You know, today I'm kind of like Steve said, listening. Got a heads up yesterday of the topic and that was going to be on here, so I haven't had a chance to vet any thoughts or evaluation through the agency. So I'll give some personal perspective. And, you know, my role here at Ecology, we need to recruit and train the next generation of regulators. And I kind of look at the piece of the MOU that talked about term limits and the convening report. And I think that was the same goal, was to make sure we were able to bring people through and teach them about Hanford and have them be able to bring in some new perspectives as well. I'm pleased with the letter that was routed to me via the governor's office that came from Jennifer Rivers Cram from DOE. It laid out pretty much what Carrie just read, because early discussions on this didn't sound like exceptions were going to be entertained at all. And that was really a major concern for Ecology. The fact that they're included both with the designated organizations and those who are more interest specific and public at large, although it's a more onerous process to get there, is encouraging for me personally. I also I don't want to lose institutional knowledge. So that is a concern for me personally. The HAB members that term limits could impact have a vast swath of knowledge on the site and history and perspective. And I would really like to see a way for them to, if they do find a suitable replacement for some of them, a way to keep them engaged and tap into that historical knowledge. And then I'm still a little unclear on whether, once they're off the board for that 2-year term, if they can re-up like we did when I was in county government. If somebody stepped away after term limits, they could come back. So I'm interested in hearing maybe something on that from Energy and how that's been perceived over the years across the different complex. So I still have some questions there. And, you know, I guess the other thing, you know, I look at the Hanford Advisory Board is really an important cog and deserves the respect that we give the Hanford Senior Executive Committee, which is the director, Brian Vance, and then leadership over at EPA. And, you know, in those cases, they get agendas ahead of time. We've kind of fallen out of getting those agendas early, and I know there was thought process and decision making to happen for the agenda today. But I would really like us to get back to making sure people have documentation, you know, at least a week ahead of time for important conversations like this, and showing that respect to the folks that volunteer their time on here. So I think I'll stop there because I'm drifting further into my personal thoughts. So thank you.
Let's check in with EPA. Dave Enan, I saw your name. Are you with us?
I am, and thank you for the opportunity. I will keep it short because I think mostly, like David started off, I want to start off mostly by listening, but you know, the board is important. You know, kind of couple of primary functions. One is it's important for me to hear, for the agencies to hear the diverse perspectives, to get the advice from you all. And then of course the reverse is also true. You know, we rely on you to get the information back to your constituencies. Very, very critical, important roles. You know, again, like David said, just got the heads up. So we're pulling the same documents and reviewing them, and don't have any kind of official positions yet. That's something we're going to be working on. So again, for the short term, I need to listen and hear what you all have to say. And again, I'll keep this short so we can get to that. Thank you.
All right. Carrie, do you have anything you want to add before we jump to CUBE?
Yeah, so I appreciate your input, David and Dave, and just for clarity for the board, I will say that that I had been having conversations with both David and Dave over the last several weeks as I had been hearing possibilities. So, you know, it's not like we haven't talked at all, but, you know, the final determination was not made until yesterday, or actually, I'm sorry, it was last Thursday afternoon. And so I did talk with Dave Enan for just a few minutes. Unfortunately, David Bowen and I weren't able to connect. And so while I left him a message, I recognized that that's not the best way to connect. So we'll continue to stay engaged and working together as a team on this as we go forward.
All right, we've got some folks in queue. Susan Leckband, you're first. I want to check with our 7 folks on the phone, and then we'll move to Bob and Tom Galeotto. Susan?
Thank you, and thanks everybody for being on. As you can imagine, this is very upsetting and disconcerting because for long-time board members, it feels like the Department of Energy would like to get rid of the institutional knowledge, frankly, some of which is longer than some of the DOE employees as far as Hanford cleanup is concerned. And I understand the nervousness and the struggle you have to bring this forward. It feels very political. There's no question that the board already has an extraordinary diversity of opinion, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the EMSSAB requirement, the interpretation of the law for these advisory boards. If you've been to any one of our meetings, you realize that there is an incredible diversity of opinion, and each one of the organizations currently on the board has chosen their representative and provided that to the Department of Energy for the appointments, but they represent an incredibly diverse group of people in each of these organizations. And I think that it speaks incredibly well for the more than 300 pieces of advice done by consensus, working through the diverse issues as people on the board. I am concerned that this is more political than really trying to reach diversity. And I understand that the Department of Energy works in a political world. Not my first rodeo, so I get that. But I think there needs to be some very careful implementation, because it feels like you'd like to get rid of some people that, or some organizations that simply don't agree with what DOE is doing. And if indeed these boards are here and valuable and are here to present real opinions from citizens and not just be another volunteer cheerleading organization, I understand that. We've been struggling through this pandemic, as each one of the organizations who participate here. And I'm grateful that the Department of Energy has continued, along with the regulating agencies, to allow us to meet and work toward meeting it. But we have also struggled getting the kind of and the level of information we need to actually provide informed advice. We want to provide informed advice. We don't want to try to bring something out of a hat. So we're struggling with the inability to get the level of information we need. And granted, some of it is at a detail that is not policy level, but in order to develop policy level advice, we need to have details so that we can do our sausage making and work through to provide that informed advice and recommendations that we are told you are actually looking for. So I'm kind of struggling with this, having been a longtime board member, and maybe you just want some of us longtime board members to go away so that you can have people who don't have the history and understand how the board operated in the past because that'd be easier. There's no question. It'd be easier if you didn't have people. But I want you to think long and hard. And I actually have a question. I'm curious as to the real genesis of this change that you're trying to effect. Is this something that headquarters is dictating, or is this what the local Department of Energy management has decided needed to change? I'm just curious as to the genesis.
All right.
And I guess we'll just stand by, since I'm a longtime member. Maybe my next appointment won't be approved. I don't know, but I probably won't still stop talking. Thank you.
Kelly, I see your hand. Why don't you jump in?
I wanted to respond to Susan. You had a lot of questions there, and I was trying to take notes. So if I don't answer something, please let me know. I'm not purposely skipping any question. It's just that there was a list there. And I also want to answer David Bowen's question that he had mentioned during his portion. So the 6-year term limit is in total. Even if you leave for a couple years, your 6 years that you have served will always count. And it's 6 years no matter which seat you sit in. If you sit in the educational seat, if you sit in a 15-member organizational seat, it does not matter where you sit. The clock starts ticking, and it ticks the entire time that you serve, no matter which seat you sit in. Same goes for primary or alternate, because I do understand that you guys have alternates. So it is 6 years no matter where you serve or in what position. So just to answer that, I do want to point out that everybody can still participate. Everything that the advisory board does, not only in Hanford, but all of our 8 specific advisory boards that make up the SSAB, are open to the public. I want to also point out that according to FACA, subcommittees can have members of the public on them. So if you want to participate and you are no longer a member, or you know somebody who may be a neighbor or a friend who's interested in participating, they can participate at the committee level. Full board meetings, the opportunity for the public to participate and to provide information is during formal public comment periods. But I do want to point out the committee option. That has been an option for years, if not since the beginning. I can't say for sure since the beginning, but I've been with the department and doing advisory boards for 20 years, and that's always been an option. So I do want to point that out, that there are ways for people who have served on the board, or for people who have never served on the board but have an interest in participating. There are mechanisms, and the main way is committee meetings. I understand the public comment period is limited usually to 15 minutes, and so that doesn't provide a huge amount of time to participate, but there are other ways to participate. I also wanted to respond to Susan talking about the diversity, and Susan is correct that diversity, one of the areas of diversity that we look at is interest, the interest of the community. We have it broken down in the MOU. There's multiple interests that are listed, but our diversity that we are trying to obtain is larger than just interests. We also Sorry, I don't know. I don't think that was me.
But I'll mute people. I'm not afraid of that.
So we are holding all of the advisory boards to the same diversity goals that we're trying to meet. And I can even give you numbers if that helps you. So with gender, we're trying to do at least 40% female and 40% male. For education, we're trying to do at least 25% with GEDs and associate degrees and high school diplomas. 25% with bachelor degrees, and 25% with master's or above. So we are trying to get diversity in people's educational levels. We're also doing the same with age. We're trying to get 20% under 30, 20% between 31 through, off the top of my head, I think it's 45, and then 45 to 60. And so we're holding the diversity at a level that's not just one specific category, category with interest. That has not always been the case, that it was documented that we were trying to get these diversity goals, but we've always had the intent of making sure that the board is balanced. So we have looked at gender, we have looked at these things, but we're formalizing it now and asking that each site, track those statistics to make sure that we're getting diversity in all of the different areas. And then I also wanted to point out that the 15 organizations that are identified in the MOU, we're not changing that. We're not saying that those 15 organizations who have a standing spot on the board can't continue to determine who represents them. We feel it's very appropriate for an organization who has a standing seat on the board to determine who represents them. That is definitely their point of view, and we want to support that. And that is the reason why we're not asking for the extensive recruitment documentation that we're asking for the other seats. And so all of those other seats that are identified in the MOU, there's 12 of them, they represent interest. And so it's, I have my list here just to make sure I don't misspeak. We have 3 from workforce, 1 from environmental, 1 from public health, so on and so forth. And those don't belong to a specific organization. I do understand for several years, if not decades, the same organization has been tapped multiple times over the years to fill those seats. But that's not what is specifically listed in the MOU. The MOU only calls out those 15 organizations, and we think it's imperative that we stick to the MOU. That was agreed upon. It's formed this board in amazing ways. We're not wanting to get away from that. And so we're not saying that those organizations who have for many years filled those interest seats, that they can't do that anymore. They can still nominate a person. Absolutely. We encourage that. We value these interest organizations' perspectives, but we can no longer only tap one organization for that perspective. We are guided by Executive Order 14035. And that was an executive order that came out in June, and it says that the federal government as a whole, so it's not just the department, but it says the federal government as a whole, and it specifically calls out advisory boards that are under FACA, have to diversify. They have to be more inclusive. And then there's a couple of other things that they have said in there, but those are the 2 that are really driving so much of what we're trying to do here, because we have to be able to put forward a package and say we did our absolute best to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to apply who was interested. And this is what we're trying to do. And so, for instance, if we are trying to fill, and I'm just picking one, but like the public health interest seat, and we advertise, we go out to public health organizations, we go to anything and everything that we can think of related to public health, and we do not get any applicants, but the existing person who is filling that seat is still interested in participating, then put the exception request in with the documentation of everything that we did to make sure that the community was aware of the opportunity, and then we can evaluate that exception. So it's really just making sure that we are opening our doors to anybody who's interested. It is not trying to limit who participates. It's actually doing the opposite. But I anticipate that there are some categories that are hard to fill sometimes. There's just not maybe as many people who are interested in a specific area, and we won't get as many applicants. And so just please know that this is not trying to limit anybody's participation. It's really trying to do the opposite and open it up and just thoroughly recruit rather than recruiting narrowly. And that's to meet those diversity requirements. Did I skip any questions, Susan? Okay.
All right. So let me check in with the folks on the phone. Is there anybody on the phone who has a question who is like waving your hand at us, and I don't want to miss you?
Yes, this is Lorraine Contreras with Yakima Nation. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I'm also online, but I'm on the phone because my speaker and stuff on my computer don't work. Anyway, my question, so if you know, being that I'm actually designated by the Yakama Nation, our elected officials, you know, to fill the role. And after, like, say, I'm here 6 years, what if they continue to appoint me? Would that be an exception because of the fact that I'm in this program long-term and our elected officials, like we have a council member who is also a member of HAB and was formerly a staff person. So would that qualify as an exception? That's my question.
Yeah, so, oh, you want to go, Kelly?
It doesn't matter. You tell me, Carrie.
Go ahead.
So if you are appointed to represent one of the 15 organizations that are listed in the MOU, you will still require an exception because we have to follow our charter, which says that terms can only be up to a total of 6 years without an exception. But we will not be asking for any documentation for you trying to recruit a different person for the position. So like Carrie mentioned earlier, nothing is guaranteed in terms of exception and reappointment, but we are not going to require any type of extensive recruitment to fill the positions of the 15 organizations designated by the MOU. So short order, you can serve more than 6 years if we put in an exception request and it gets approved. Like I mentioned, we think it's very important for the 15 organizations to be able to determine who represents them on the board.
Is there anyone else on the phone who has a question?
Yeah, this is Mike Ranko. Can you hear me?
Oh, wow, we've got an echo going on, Mike.
I'm on
Is your speaker on the computer on as well?
I'm gonna shut that off just to be sure.
There it is. Okay.
There it is. Okay.
Yeah. I just had a few thoughts. I wasn't going to comment, but I listened to this. And we have been worried about diversity for the last 6 years at least. We've been putting a lot of attention on it, and this is just the next wave. Do we hit towards saying that we are not the first? Are we trying to fix the problem? The first question, because I think we're proud of our diversity record, and I kind of fall in the category of I've violated the 6 years. I'm probably here 12 years. So do I have to resign? What's the protocol if you're on the board now? You clearly violated and don't quite know what to do about that. Not too happy about that because there's no category of diversity of experience. And I personally have more than 30 years experience at Hanford and Rocky Flats and working for the Department of Navy. And I think I add value to the Department of Energy, and volunteering takes a lot of time. So clearly the DOE headquarters, no matter what you say, you're really trying to get rid of us. And that is not going to help you from the standpoint, the technical content of our proposals or advices. So I just don't know, for example, you are assuming there's a direct link to 6 years in diversity. That's an assumption. So why are you so adamant that somehow by fixing six years, you're going to increase diversity? And let me say, you are not the first DOE headquarters person that we've been discussing and brainstorming on how to improve diversity. So I frankly think this is just the latest of a number of initiatives we've all been working on. But all of a sudden you're doing proposals that are actually destructive. So that's my opinion.
So I'm going to mute everybody at this point just to clear out some of the background noise. So I don't know, Shelley, you or Carrie, if you want to respond to that before we continue on with the queue. You'll have to unmute yourself because I just muted everybody.
I think Kelly had started to unmute to answer something.
Well, and I want to apologize. I was having a hard time hearing exactly the question part of what you were saying. But the 6-year term limit is not new. The term limits are not new. Term limits have been in effect for decades. And the exception opportunity has been also part of the charter for decades. We're just asking for additional documentation to make sure we understand and that the various reviewers who approve these appointments understand what has been done to ensure communities are aware of the opportunity to participate on advisory boards. Like we had mentioned earlier, there are 8 boards that make up the EMSSAB, and we are we're not holding anybody to a different standard. It's very important that all of our boards are treated equally. We all know that the HAB also has an MOU that it operates underneath. And so we got to make sure that everything is also in compliance with the MOU, which it is. And so I want to point out, you know, I understand that this is not what everybody wants to hear or what anybody wants to hear, but it is important that we operate our advisory boards fairly and consistently. We have received concerns from other boards that are part of the SSAB that do not get extension after extension after extension for their board members to participate. And they do not understand why the HAB is treated differently. And when we point to the MOU does not guarantee extended term limits either. It doesn't even mention the term limits. And so we're making sure that we're doing this fairly. And like I mentioned, there is the executive order that came out in June. So there are multiple drivers to this. And I'm sorry, sir, if I did not answer your question. I think that answers what you were talking about, but looks like Carrie can help fill in the gaps.
Thanks, Kelly. So there were a couple other things in there. And so one of them, Mike, was you asked if you would have to resign. And you are representing Franklin and Grant counties. And so those are named entities. And so you do not have to resign. If Franklin and Grant County want to nominate you to continue representing them, they can do that, and we will request an exception to the term limit. So that's the answer to that question. The other aspect was in regards to diversity and demographics. And when we started having this conversation not the November we just had, November of 2020, that was one of the things that we discussed. And I shared with you what our community demographics were as compared to what our HABs were. And we've improved those, but we're still not there. You know, before last year's board package, before the current package was approved, we had 0 Hispanic representation. Yet our community is 38% Hispanic. And, you know, and it's the same with females. We had significantly fewer females on the board than we did males. And, you know, it's not that we can just make sweeping changes. And we've talked about this as well. We also have to look at operational changes that we may need to make in order to increase diversity. Holding our meetings in the middle of the day is unlikely to get people who are at the working class level to working class, those people who are in day jobs to be able to participate. Because, you know, let's just think about it for a second. If you only get 2 weeks a year of vacation, and you've got to take 2 days off every other month to participate in a meeting, you're going to burn through your vacation pretty quick. So we have current blocks in place that are potentially impacting our ability to recruit the next generation as well. And so it's not just about bringing in the right ethnic diversities. It's age group, it is education level, and it's gender based as well. So as a whole, we are going to have to work on that. The other aspect is recruitment. You know, last year we really went out hard to increase our recruitment efforts and to focus on some of those demographic areas where we knew we were weak, and we were successful. But I'm not sure that we do that every year. And so we have that aspect. And in regards to to our board members who have technical expertise, that's great, and that helps you understand those briefings. But the advice shouldn't be focused on technical solutions. It should be focused on policy level. And in order to assure that we are providing opportunity for that kind of input, we are very specifically trying not to get into a significantly deep level of technical discussion, because that precludes those who aren't technical by trade from participating in those discussions. And so it's a fine line that we have to ride. We have to provide enough detail that you can provide us actionable policy level advice, but not so much detail that that we lose half of the group who are participating. And then I would say, conversely, the board has to be open to the information that we're providing. You know, we've had many instances over the last year where we have provided briefing after briefing, and it's still not enough. You know, the fact is we give you the facts and you want more, and sometimes it's not constructive.
David Bowen, did Carrie address your question?
I was just keying in on the effort for diversity and working people. You mentioned GEDs, and I know my team has relayed to me that getting people in that 20 to 30-year-old age group that will be carrying this forward for the next few decades is important. And we're curious if there's been success in recruiting 20 and 30-year-olds or maybe 40-year-olds at other boards. And then as far as being able to attract the demographic you mentioned with the GEDs and working folks, we would require a change in meeting times and possible compensation. And I was curious if there are any mechanisms to address that across the complex.
So we have been putting these diversity goals out there for all of our advisory boards. And so there are a number of sites who have already submitted packages for appointment approval that have been appointed since we started this initiative. And yes, there has been an increase in representation from those under the age of 30 and those with a high school level education. The site has to get really creative thinking of ways to recruit. Often, for instance, like Savannah River went out and worked with the Greek system in the universities and solicited applications from university students, those that have a community requirement as part of their membership in Greek organizations. Some of the sites have gone to the high school level to recruit members as well as in community colleges, gone to union meetings to see if any tradesmen are interested and tradeswomen are interested in applying. So yes, we have had some success. You are absolutely right that it is hard to sometimes get applicants for all of these different areas. And that's one of the reasons why we want to keep, pursuing an exception as an option, because we don't want to not fill a seat just because we couldn't find somebody who has served, 6 years or less. The important thing is to get somebody to fill the position who can provide this perspective of either public at large or the interest group for those 12 interest groups. And if that means it's an existing member, that's great. We just need to make sure that there are no other people who are interested in filling that spot. And then speaking of the question about, do you have to quit the board? If your current appointment will continue until your date of ending that is included in the letter. And so for most of you, that's several months from now, if not over a year, depending on when your appointment letter came out. We are implementing these changes as we speak with all of our boards. And the way it falls for the Hanford board is we should be receiving your membership package in the next couple of months. And that package is the one that needs to be in line with these changes that we're talking about now.
All right. So I've got at least 10 people in line, and I want to thank you for your patience. Normally we don't have 9 or 10 people in line. So Bob Suyama and then Tom Galeotto. I'm going to put Jerry and Shelley in queue as well. Bob?
Yes, I was just wondering about the process you're going to use. On the specific interest groups, if we had an organization that's been doing one of the environmental seats for some time, and you find somebody else, some other group also has a proposed person they want to put forward, who makes that final decision at the local level of which group gets put forward for membership? Is that something that goes, both packages go up and you guys make the decision, or does our local group that puts together the package make those decisions? And then I have a couple of other questions after you answer that. Sure.
The local site makes the determination of who is submitted to headquarters for appointment. From what I understand, each site does it a little differently. And from what I understand, in Hanford, the members of the tri-party agreement discuss. Well, Carrie, why don't I let you answer that? I don't want to misspeak, but from my understanding, there's some discussion amongst the tri-parties for nominees.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So we do discuss the nominees with PIOs. It is very rare that we have competing requests. And to be frank, that would be a great problem to have. So, that would mean that our recruitment efforts are actually working. But as long as I can remember, we've not had that issue. Now, I will say last year we did keep one of the public at large seats vacant because we were, to be frank, sensitive to adding those seats. And we felt that we had achieved the diversity demographics that we were trying to balance a bit. And so we elected to keep one of those seats vacant. I don't think that that's something we'll want to do going forward, though.
Okay. And then, the board under Tom Cecilia has been working at looking at all the members and trying to figure out what seats do not have active membership. People may have been appointed, but they're not really active on the board. If we have to do a MOU update to add these additional public at large seats, and maybe this would be an opportunity to clarify a little bit on the process that you're going to use. So we kind of have a process that's defendable as we go forward, and people say, why wasn't I chosen, or why was I dropped? So that's a recommendation, and I'm not sure exactly where we stand on Tom's membership or participation committee, but we're also working on the process manual right now, and that has to go lockstep with the MOU as far as how things are done. And then the final question I have is the process for approvals. I was led to believe there are 23 approvals required to get a membership package through. Are we going to discuss that some more this afternoon? Because I'd like to find out what those 23 approvals represent and kind of understand the bigger picture of how all this fits together.
Sure, I can respond to the 23 reviewer question. There are not 23 official approvals that have to go in, but there are numerous ones. And to be honest, it's different at each site, because some sites only require the site manager approval before it's submitted to headquarters, and some sites also have additional people that they include in before the package is sent to headquarters. So the approvals essentially start at the local level with the DOE management there, and then when it goes to headquarters, what I can do is I can give you, I don't have the list in front of you, but I can give you the general, a general idea of who reviews packages. And so it comes to myself, I'm the designated federal officer, and then it makes its way up the chain, and it must be approved by EM4, EM2, EM1, and then it goes to boards and council, the Office of Boards and Council. It goes to the White House Liaison, it goes to General Counsel, and it also goes to the Community Management Office. And so within all of those different offices, there may be one or two approvers in each, typically one. And then it makes its way up to the Secretary's office, and it has to receive approval there. And then that's the last approval that's necessary, and then it comes back down to EM1/EM2's office for an actual appointment letter being signed and sent out. So it's not 23, but it is extensive, and it's also a little bit different depending on which site you're at, regarding local procedures that are in place that each site determines how they develop their draft packages. Carrie?
Yeah, so I was just going to address the local review. So the package gets put together, I review it, we review it with the PIOs. So Roberto and Ryan, sorry, all of a sudden I blanked. Roberto and Ryan. I don't know if they share it with Dave and David, but once we get through the PIOs, I share it with Brian Stickney and Brian Vance, Ben Harp, and then it goes up.
Tom Galeotto and then Rob Davis. Tom?
Yes, thanks. I've got two questions for Kelly. The first one is a while ago, I think probably late November or early December, the HAB as well as the other MSSAB organizations sent out a list of impacts that the delay in the last approval package has caused. And the first question I have is, have you seen that overall list, and what was your general impression of it?
The letter still has not been finalized because one of the 8 boards has not met yet since our chairs meeting. So the letter has not been officially transmitted to headquarters yet. But I have seen the list. I've seen the draft letter, and I've been involved with each of the sites board staff to really understand the impacts. And I know they're very real. I know that it is not what we want. We want to make sure that boards are accessible, that members are being appointed in a timely manner. It's imperative that our boards are fully populated to truly represent those communities that they're representing. We don't want a situation where our boards are unable to operate because they don't have a full representation because they're waiting for appointments. I'm very, very passionate about this. This is something that I think that all of the sites will tell you that I am constantly pushing for and trying to think of ways to solve this very long appointment process. The process is not completely determined by EM. As I mentioned earlier, you heard me talk about different entities that are part of the approval process and things that we have to follow. But I can tell you that I am working on things behind the scenes to try and come up with ways to ensure that we don't have lags of membership and that boards are populated. I don't have anything officially approved yet, but I am working towards a solution.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I sat in on the EMSSAB chairs call back in early October and heard your presentation there, and I recognize that you are very interested in solving these kinds of issues. The second question I have is, and maybe you can't reveal this now because you haven't really officially seen the letter. What initiatives are you proposing to actually streamline that process so that we can avoid this in the future? Yeah, I've had, based on our discussion or your discussion in the early October meeting with the chairs, I have several, I don't know if I call them recommendations, but several items that I think would be worthy of consideration to help in that process. But I'd appreciate hearing what you would like to push for to resolve that issue.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that that I was able to identify, and just to give you guys a little bit of background, I was with the Nevada Site-Specific Advisory Board for almost 20 years as their DDFO and their federal coordinator. And I've been the DFO for the Site-Specific Advisory Board for 2 years. So I have a perspective that's not just from headquarters, but a solid perspective from being in the field. And so I really do understand how the membership packages work at both levels now. And one of the things that I was able to identify is that many times recruitment is done, a package is developed, and then it goes to headquarters. And this is probably 3 months or so after the applicant has put in an application. So we're already 3 months waiting for an answer. And that's just when the package gets to headquarters. And then it has to go through a very long, extensive process there. So we have people who are applying and not actually getting told for 6 to 9 months if they've been appointed to the board. And I recognize that everybody is a volunteer. And if you're willing to give your time and your heart and soul in many cases to this organization, and you don't hear back for 9 months, that's really disheartening. And so one of the things that I was able to see is that when packages come up to headquarters and they've already been essentially being worked for 3 months from the time of recruitment to the application being filled out, is that if headquarters is going to have an opinion on the members, the site needs to know earlier. The site needs to know before that entire package has been developed, because the packages are very extensive. And so what I've put in place is a pre-approval, and it does add about 2 weeks to the approval process, but it has saved us so much time. So I am getting a check-in with senior management saying this is the proposed slate that site XYZ is wanting to put forward. Do you have any concerns with this? And what I'm supplying with that is not only the biographies of the individuals, but also the statistics related to how does this compare to the census demographics for the area. So we look at it early on before that actual package is even developed and all of that time is spent. And that has been very helpful because we've been able to catch any issues at that point. We have had packages come up, well, not packages, we're trying to do this before packages, but we've had information come up requesting pre-approval, and we've had senior management say, you know what, I'm concerned that we don't have enough representation in this area. Go back out, see if you can do additional recruitment, so that when that package comes up, which takes a lot of time to develop, it has a smoother chance of going through, and it has cut down the time of the appointment process. So that's just an example of one of the things that I've done. We're also doing that same thing with the pre-approvals with the Office of Boards and Council now. They're going to be doing a pre-approval before the entire package is put together to help stop that so far into the process. If they want to say, whoa, that doesn't work for us, by the time it gets to them, it's normally been in the system for several months. And so now we're going to get their pre-approval earlier, and they've done a phenomenal job so far of turning those packages around very quickly. And so I see improvements. The last couple of packages that have come through at other sites have gone through much faster and much smoother with some of these changes that we've made in the last year or so.
Good. Well, thank you.
All right. We've got 10 folks in the queue. Steve, do you want to keep going, or do you want to give people a break and then keep going?
Well, I would root to keep going, but if folks need a break, we can do that. There's just so much to cover that if we need individual breaks, we can kind of wing out.
Okay.
Kelly and I are good with continuing on.
Okay. I just know that 2.5 hours is a long time. So
it's just this is a very important conversation. So I need to let everybody have their say.
Right. So we've got 10 folks in queue right now. I also want to double check back with the phone folks sort of partway through that. So Rob, Max, and then Steve. Rob?
Oh, I have so much to say, but I can't say some of it. First of all, I don't see that we've had a problem with diversity in the past, not at the Hanford Board. Okay, and we don't have a problem, so people are out looking for solutions of no problems. Agreed. We don't conform the rest of the SSAB tribe of commissions or of boards. That's because we got the most waste of anybody out there. And if it wasn't, and it seems as if we're not appreciating the technical expertise in the board, because a lot of our problems here are technically related. We have issued more advice than any other board out there. It's been thoughtful. It's got value statements. A problem was never there in the beginning. And now you've created additional problems for the rest of the people on the board. You probably don't realize that some of us have been volunteered on the board, serving on the board since 2007, maybe 2005, 2004, that we never got paid for this. We weren't working for this. We were taking vacation for these 2 days every, probably 2 days every 3 or 4 months. Okay, that's just the way it was. So this idea that it was really easy and simple before, and now we're making it more complex. And you think about it, if you're going to charter an organization to have to go out and come up with a whole bunch of justification paperwork on what they did here and what they did there, do you realize the man hours are going to have to be put into something like that? Do you realize the burden you're going to put on a administrative assistant at the office that's running the organization? I mean, this is kind of silly that for a completely volunteer organization of the board to intentionally cause us to have to expend a lot more resources just to get the job done. Okay, the other thing is that, like I said before, is to the perspective of the board, okay, we don't feel we're at all not representative of our people and our public and the problem we have to solve here, the waste at the Hanford site. Okay, and I just don't think that Washington, D.C. really understands the challenges that we have at the Hanford site. We have people still believing that there's stainless steel vessels out there, as opposed to corroding carbon steel waste tanks. Okay, so I did that. I think most of our advice is quite valuable so far. We've aided, we've helped. You know, when we come to technical problems, we find that in many cases our board members know a lot more than what the presenter is giving us from the DOE. We know what's going on. We've been to the facilities. Anyway, that's the one thing is I just don't feel that you headquarters and the people understand that experience matters here. It really does. The next thing is if you are really going to end up causing a lot more paper, then you got to start giving stipends. And I thought that was kind of clever. You went to a college and got a grad student that's trying to get in just in environmental justice and get some credits and points, but you're still paying them. They're still getting a reward for it. As soon as they get their degree, they're gone. The point is that you're supposed to make it easy for us. You're supposed to invite our opinions. And we are unique. And so I guess my biggest thing in the end is that I didn't really see a need to change, and many others didn't see a need to change, but we're going to change, and that's what we're going to live with. And as I do care tremendously about the Hanford site. You know, most of my life has been invested in this site or other nuclear facilities around the country. We truly are an exception to the rule. We don't get near the budget we should be getting for the cleanup. We know that. We don't get the representatives talking about the Hanford site, worrying about where's the environmental justice for the people, for the desert out there that we've contaminated. There isn't any.
Hey, Rob.
Okay.
Rob,
Yeah.
we need
Am I just rattling?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
we need to let everybody have an opportunity. Your views are passionate and very strong, and I think we understand you.
Thank you. Thanks for interrupting me too.
Can I clarify one thing?
Yes.
Regarding the stipend that he mentioned, none of our members receive a stipend for participation. All of our members are eligible for travel reimbursements in accordance with the federal government outlines, and so you can get per diem and travel reimbursement, but we do not pay any of our members to participate.
All right. I've got Max, Steve, and then Tom. Max, thank you for waiting.
Yeah, all right. Thanks. This is Max Woods from Oregon Department of Energy. Thanks for having me. I have a couple specific, maybe more nuts and bolts questions to run through. And I'll try and keep this as kind of quick and to the point as I can. Is there an outlined criteria for the Carrie and Kelly? I think you mentioned the recruitment process that would have to occur to justify an exception to be granted for the term limits. Do you have a sort of a criteria or definition that you might use for how much outreach, how much recruitment has ongoing to kind of prop up that definition and make that justification? That's sort of maybe one question. Or if you don't, you may want to consider just getting that form together to sort of balance the criteria against what you're doing to outline that process.
So at headquarters, we don't have a specific a list or criteria because each of the sites is very unique. I can't come up with something for Savannah River that's going to work for Oak Ridge, it's going to work for Hanford, since each of the communities are so unique. So we really do rely on the local site offices to understand what the community makeup is in terms of organizations that are available, in terms of outreach opportunities. We don't have that information at headquarters as well as the people in the field. So we do rely on each site to determine that.
All right, thank you for that. Let me go on with my second question here. Do the intergovernmental groups count towards your diversity metrics? If you understand my question, meaning if the intergovernmental groups get to choose their own representatives, then you're putting the responsibility for increasing the diversity of the board onto the interest groups, and that may be, that might be a lot for those groups to wear and bear.
Right. The diversity of the board is based on the whole of the board. So for the 37 individuals who are appointed to the board, we have discussed this regarding, where the department can have, the sway of ensuring diversity. It is with those 12 interest seats and the 10 public at large seats. However, we encourage the 15 organizations that are listed in the MOU to think about diversity and to think about how they can help ensure that the board has diverse viewpoints. We can't control who they nominate since they have standing positions, but we are encouraging everybody who fills in the makeup of the board to think about it from a diverse standpoint.
Thank you for that. My final question, and I'll exit here. Do you consider the diversity of an organization or a person when counting for your metrics?
Could you say that again?
Do you consider when you're assessing the diversity of the board, do you look at the organizations or the specific people that might sit? Like, do you look at me, Max, or would you look at the state of Oregon as I represent my seat here? It's probably easier to look at maybe one of the tribal groups. Do you consider the tribes to have a seat that represents a tribal interest, but that person may not be a citizen of that tribal nation?
So it's both. We would count the representative of a tribe as, a tribal representative. If that person also identified as a tribal member and they put that on their application, then they would also, count toward the ethnicity demographic. We can look at things from a variety of viewpoints, and we try to do that just to ensure that that we're not looking, narrowly down anything. We want to make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible.
Okay. And my last question. You mentioned the executive order from last summer. Does that include, or is there another document that includes the metrics that you're trying to achieve that's been written down? You listed them off pretty quick at the beginning, and I couldn't jot them down real quick, but I'd be curious to know what the targets are.
Sure, I can send that to you. Yeah, I think Gary has the latest version, but Gary and I will make sure that we have the current version and get that out to you guys.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Right. Steve Wigman, then Tom Cecilia. Steve?
Thank you. Kelly, you made a comment a while back that is intriguing to me from the perspective of how we move forward. And it is that members of the public can be members of committees. That would be a dramatic evolution in the way we do business. And I'm just curious if you have some insights as to how that works other places, and is that something we could actually do here? Because it would give us a method of retaining some of the institutional knowledge that we may lose as people expire their terms.
Carrie, I saw you had your hand raised. Did you want to respond first?
Well, all of a sudden, I wanted to clarify. I don't know that Kelly was saying they would be official members of a committee, but they can participate on the committee. So in the full board meeting, Steve, the public is restricted to comment during the public comment period of the meeting. Whereas in the committee meetings, they can have an active dialogue, go back and forth, and they can weigh in on the advice that's being developed. And I believe that's how other site-specific advisory boards work that as well. Did I capture that, Kelly?
Correct. So, and I'm just making this up, but at one of the boards, you might have a groundwater committee, and the majority of the committee, which this is important to know, the majority of your committee has to be board members. You cannot have more members of the public than you do members of the board. And so, you can have discussions, you can work on recommendations and have all of those things, but members of the public cannot vote. So they cannot be part of the official, sending it forward to the full board for full review, but they can provide input. So Carrie's correct that, that they're part of the committee, but they're not officially a voting member.
Okay, given that that's a dramatic difference for us, no matter how we manage it, is there something written that describes how that in context would function with a board like ours?
That would be located in your bylaws and your operating procedures. So if you don't have anything in there now, that might be something that you can work with site staff to figure out how that fits in. The actual procedures for how that operates is not defined at the headquarters level.
Okay. I would just like folks to think about that in relation to how we go forward. Our board has been in business for a long time and needs to be in business for a long time to come. And that would be a creative opportunity for us to keep tabs on the knowledge of folks who rotate off the board. Over.
My logistical head has just gotten busy. Tom Cecilia and then Richard Bloom. Tom?
Thanks for the conversation. There's a lot to unpack here. I hear that there's a call for diversity, but without having a metric that the diversity is being compared to, you're saying, bring me a rock. What is the target? This is a regional board of interests. So looking at the census numbers for, the Pasco Basin is arbitrary.
Right. So I know exactly what you're saying. And Gary, if you want to chime in here, Carrie, if you want to handle it, that we do have an identified list of goals that we're trying to achieve. This isn't just something that we're going forward with without a plan. And I know that there's been discussion regarding counties that are going to be targeted based on previous discussions that you guys have had. So I'll stop talking and Carrie can fill in the details.
Thanks, Kelly. So I haven't pulled them for this year, but last year when we pulled through the census data, we identified in the surrounding communities, and granted that's not regional, it's just surrounding, that we had 54% Caucasian, 39 Hispanic, 3% Native American, 2 African American, and then 2% other, with 53% of the population being male, 47% being female. And then when you go to education, 25% had bachelor's degrees, 25% had high school diplomas, 15.6 had bachelor's, 10% had master's or higher, and the rest was categorized in other. So that was a little hard.
I definitely appreciate that, and that would be great in writing. It's a question of how the calculus is done, and I know you guys have a daunting task because every one of the governments of every one of those citizens is represented on the board. So, and that's part of the IM team's problem we were trying to figure out is, how do you represent the diversity of a government that's representing the diverse populace? But that's there's
But
more.
I wasn't quite done yet,
Sorry,
Tom.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so those are the basic numbers. Coming up with what the demographics, what we think they should be for next year, is part of the discussion we want to have with the board. Okay, recognizing that those are the general pots. Okay, and then looking at what we have. It's not, we want to have specific goals, but we're not going to just throw them out and say you have to meet this. We want to have a discussion. And that's part of what today is about, is starting that discussion.
Okay.
And then talking about how we calculate. And, you know, so how far out do we want to pull communities? I mean, this was one snapshot. Do we want to go a little bit further? Do we want to stay within the 100-mile radius? How do we want to calculate that? Or do we want to break out for the regional, and just the regional area expand further? It's part of the discussion we want to have with the group.
It seems like maybe we should schedule a standing committee of the whole to talk through these type of things. So, you know, we're having open lines of communication. We can say, you know, this is a new regional environmental group that's voiced interest in joining the board. What do we think? So it's not a decide, announce, defend. It's a collaboration. One last point I wanted to ask. The MOU talks about the public at large seats being intended to, you know, make up for some diversity of the board if it's needed. Is the intent to just keep adding public at large seats? That's going to be a quorum nightmare if we do that.
No, the intent is not to add any more public at large seats. So I'm going to be really frank with everyone. When we looked at this last year, knowing that the administration was looking at diversity, you know, the administration came in, and the way our nominating process goes, I elected that rather than try to change everything, I went to headquarters and said I would like to do this. And then I talked with EPA and ecology. And what this was instead of changing how we were currently structured, just adding those additional public at large seats to start increasing the diversity. Okay, and that helped us in some areas, but it still puts us out of alignment, and it still puts us in a place where we are potentially prohibiting or preventing other people who would like to serve on the board the opportunity to do so. And that's an important aspect of all of our FACA compliant boards. We want to provide opportunities, and it's not just the diversity, but for the next generation to participate as well.
Thanks.
All right. I know some of you have been waiting, so I thank you for your patience. Richard and then Shannon.
Well, I think I'm up. I'll even show my pretty face. I guess as an elected official, I have two comments. One is, this is one of many collateral duties I have. And you know, we rearrange our collateral duties every year, and this year I'm still on the board, but one of our members has dropped off and we have a new one. So I guess my first question is, how long before they become a real member of the board, now that we've made the selection of how we're divvying up our duties as city council members? That's my first question. Second question comes down to the comment of trying to get younger populations involved and engaged. Hanford is an extremely complicated situation, and I guess I've struggled for years, and I've been on the board since I came on council in 2010. And I've struggled trying and what I would say, educate a lot of the other board members on what's being described And just like bringing a summer intern to work with you, that takes even more time. So to try and say that we would have diversity on the board, a board member, I mean, we will have a new board member coming from West Richland, but a board member, you know, even with 40 years of working at Hanford or 30 years at the time working at Hanford, it took me 2 or 3 years to figure out what was going on at the board itself. And so the aspect of having the 6-year turnover for board members, it's really going to be an extra burden on board members just to bring them up to speed, much to have them actively participate and feel comfortable. You know, it's the old saying, you know, trying to get a member of the public to come speak at city council is almost impossible. You know, especially in the virtual environment, we have maybe 3 or 4 ever come. I'm chairman of the local transit board. I can't get, you know, unless I've got a huge issue, I can't get people involved. We can't get comments on the transit plan. So, and then the other aspect is all of our assignments that we have. You talk about having evening meetings and things of that nature. All of our assignments that we have on the board, we try the same thing. We have the same struggle. We have our city council meetings in the evenings. We have our transit board meetings in the evening. We have many evening board meetings trying to elicit public participation. And, you know, you're just adding another layer of that that probably you're going to fail on. So I have invested a tremendous amount of time in this board. A lot of that time I don't have to invest. It is a painful board to be on. I can, nothing personal with other board members, but it's painful. And I appreciate the pain. So that's my thought is, but my real question is, how long should we look forward to our new board member being functional on the board? Thank you.
I'm not sure if Carrie wants to answer, but I agree with you completely that new members who do not have experience as a board member, it does take 1 or 2 years, and depending on the topic, 3 years. I mean, it does take a long time for people to get up to speed, even if they have a background, because the problems are so complex and extensive. And I think the 6-year term limit was decided before. It's been standing for a very long time, so it's not something that I've had a say in. But I can tell you that the majority of our members across all of the sites that have boards do serve the entire 6 years, because they have said that it takes them at least their first term to truly feel like they have their feet underneath them and can be an active participant. So I hear exactly what you're saying, and I understand. That's one of the things that I do want to do, is we need to make sure that our new members for all boards, not just for the HAB, but for all of our advisory boards, have a solid foundation in terms of orientation and the support needed by staff to get the necessary information so that they are as trained as they can be. And I do respect that, you know, this is volunteer time that everybody is putting into this. And so I want to tell you, I hear you, I understand, and I agree that timing wise, it does cause an issue that it takes so long for people to feel comfortable and feel like they're ready to actively participate. I understand exactly what you're saying.
Well, and I as a suggestion of ways of taking credit for expanding diversity, and you could challenge the current board members to reach out to bring students, others into the subcommittee meetings to participate in the subcommittee meetings to, quote, prepare the education of it. I mean, but you see, from the standpoint of diversity, you know, we have a city council of 7 members. We have 1 female member. We're not going to be able to help with the 40% aspect. Or actually, we have 2 female members. I misspoke because we did add 1. This and you know, its ability to invest the time in it that really comes into it. That's the key of being a successful board, is to have the time to invest.
Right, right. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that what is important is that we get these viewpoints appointed to the board so that they can participate. And if it's a person who has not served before and they want the opportunity to serve, wonderful. But if we are not able to get a new applicant, this is where the exception comes in so that we can continue to get that viewpoint brought in. The last thing that I want to do is stop the ability of a viewpoint to come in because the person had served too many years, or because we're trying to check a box. That is not at all what I want. I want to make sure that this board has everybody who's interested in participating has the ability to do that, including those members who have already served 6 years. That's why I had mentioned about subcommittees and participation on there, because I know how much time and effort y'all have put in and how important this work is. I don't want that to stop. We just have to make sure that we are available to others who are interested and that they're not being stopped from participating because there's not an open seat. That's really what it is. I anticipate that, you know, we'll do our best. We'll all do our best to recruit new members. But in the end, if you don't get an application, you don't get an application, and hopefully the person who is sitting in that seat now is still interested in applying, because we don't want empty seats. That's the last thing that we want, is empty seats.
Thank you.
I've got Shannon, and then I want to check with folks on the phone if there's any of them that want to get in the queue as well. Shannon?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to say first, thank you, Kelly, for all your work making that approval process happen more quickly. It is really crazy for it to take 8 to 10 months, especially for new members. So I just want to say thanks at the beginning before I forget, because that's really important, and making sure that we don't have empty seats and a quorum and, you know, good conversations. One of the things I'd love to hear, maybe not today if it isn't planned out, but just in the future from DOE, is not only a plan to just kind of make sure that people know what the board process is like, but how to help people build relationships when they're joining the board. I really think, as a longtime board member myself now, that's what keeps me coming back. I think I'm still one of the younger board members, and I'm 41. I've been on the board almost 10 years now. And I'm a teacher, so whenever I come to board meetings, I have to cancel class for the week, which is not great. And so, like, really, you know, as you guys have said, like, just, it's not enough to just say, let's diversify the board. We have to add structural support, like maybe parenting help, or really actually significant things to make it possible for people who are young, working, you know, different groups that you're trying to attract to actually be able to participate. But I've heard you say that, so I appreciate that. So yeah, again, like that relationship building thing is really important. So I would say it's as important as learning board process, like including making friendships and understanding who each other's life has been like that actually does matter in terms of us getting the consensus-based policy advice passed. So I actually have a specific question related to the regional universities. Like I said, I'm on the UW seat and have been for a long time. Because it's saying regional universities, and UW is just one of many regional universities, in the conversation about what it means for the seat to have been filled for 6 years, I'm curious what happens. Like I said, I've been on the seat for more than that. Is it the case that like UW would maybe no longer be on the board as a seat, and thus who would choose that, like when my term is up? And one other thing before I forget, I actually tried to, I talked to the UW nominating authority about getting a graduate student on the board. And it's not actually allowed. They only allowed faculty and staff to be on the board, or maybe just faculty for the UW seat nominating authority requirement. So that's something to address as well. Like, it wasn't possible for me to get a student onto the board. So if we're thinking about age diversity, that was something I was struggling with. Okay. But yeah, my question about like what happens to the UW seat at the end of this term for me, I'd be curious how the regional university seats are identified and who identifies them, and yeah.
So I don't want to cut Carrie off if she wants to speak. Carrie, do you want to answer, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
So so the seat that you're referring to is one of the 12 interest seats, correct? So
Yes.
It does not belong to a specific university. Yes, it has been filled by a specific university for several years, which, thank you. We're very appreciative of that, and we don't want to see, your relationship with us end. But this is where I think over the years, the thought process has strayed a little bit from what was actually in the MOU to how the viewpoint has become. Many of the 12 interest organizational seats have been filled by the same organization for a number of years. And there's pride in that. There's a lot of pride in that, your university or whatever organization feels like, our seat on the board. And I don't want to minimize your effort at all, but according to the MOU, no specific organization owns those 12 interest seats. And so that's the one thing that I want to really point out here that's important is even though the practice has been that the same organization fills the seat for those 12, that's not what the MOU says. And so I know that's a different thought process, and I don't want anybody to hear we're trying to get rid of the same organization filling the seat. That is not it at all. We want those organizations who are currently, filling a seat to continue to make a nomination, but we need you to understand that we're also going to solicit other universities or other environmental groups or whatever the interest is. We're just going to open up that recruitment just to see if there's anybody else who would like to nominate an individual, or a person can nominate themselves. For instance, if you are a teacher and you would like to be part of the board, you have an interest in education, and you can fill in that interest. It doesn't have to be an official organization nominating you. I know that's how it's been in the past, and so it is a shift in thinking, but we're really trying to stick with what that MOU says. So did I answer your question?
Ultimately, I just am curious about process. So it's much like right now UW submits nominees for DOE to consider. Now it would be all of the regional universities.
Correct.
We are saying Washington, Oregon, and Idaho could submit nominations, and then one would choose based on that.
Right. We accept applications from anybody who's interested, and then those applications would be reviewed. If I'm not mistaken, and this is where I probably need somebody that's on the HAB staff to answer, but those applications are reviewed by other entities besides just DOE. I know that the tri-party PIOs get involved, and I'm not sure to what extent who else gets involved.
Yeah, I can answer that, Kelly. So it comes into the PI, or it comes into the staff. They pull it all together. They present it to us, PIOs. And then from there, the PIOs connect with, their director, manager. For me, it's Brian Vance. For Ryan, it would be David Bowen, and for Roberto, it would be Dave Heenan.
Okay, thanks. That did answer my question.
We have to make the decision.
Okay, and so I just want to make sure we reiterate before I log off that we all have a really transparent and engaged, well-scheduled in advance conversation about what we mean by the region of impact. Because if we did a 100-mile radius, as you mentioned, Carrie, or just throughout there, UW would no longer be involved. So that's something that I really care about being part of that conversation. I want to make sure that we really set that aside and don't just assume without having that. But thanks for your work. Thanks.
Yeah, and let me clarify, Shannon, on that. I wasn't saying we should only representatives within a 100-mile radius. I was saying when we look at the demographics, how far out from a county perspective do we do our analysis on? I'm definitely not saying we're going to limit participation to just those counties. I was just giving an example of the discussion or the conversation we're going to have regarding how we set our demographic and diversity goals.
Okay, great. So thanks for that clarification.
So we're not,
that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Jerry, I moved you up because I know you've got other commitments today. So why don't you go next, and then I'll check with the folks on the phone.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have to return to the floor of the House virtually at 1 o'clock. So I appreciate that. There's an irony in that I've just chaired a legislative hearing about increasing diversity in our state governments and local governments procurement and other practices, especially for local government, as chair of the local government committee. And nothing could be more ironic than this discussion, which says that local governments would not have any responsibility here in the meeting the goals, as opposed to what you call interest groups. And I just have to say it reflects an utter and shocking lack of understanding of the history of this region. Are you aware of the history of segregation of the communities surrounding Hanford? Are you aware that 2 of the 3 Tri-Cities did not allow Black people to live within their limits? That Kennewick had until, and I can remember being a board member and working on Hanford cleanup and seeing the sign still up about people not being allowed on the streets after 6 p.m. because people from the other side of the river had to return home. It is shameful, the lack of understanding and how you are going about this. It is just shameful. This board was created as a representational board, and to tell regional environmental groups that we can't choose who will speak for us and our thousands of members, while recognizing that local governments have that right, and labor unions, of course, have that right, and I will fight to the death for them to be able to choose who represents them. That's why this board was created as a representational board. And if you want to increase diversity, look at the Energy Department's failure, for example, to reach out to the community of Mattawa, the largest city just north of the boundary, with the Port of Mattawa actually having property and within its taxing district that is part of Hanford. You've never reached out to them. That is a community that is 95% Latinx. That is 85% limited English proficiency. I've been working with the Port of Mattawa and city officials and the school district there to increase relationships with Hanford, along with ecology staff. And Energy has had no interest in that. So if you want to increase diversity, you would start by saying, let's increase the pool here and look at what the history is and who is represented, and not say that we are going to throw out the concept of a representational board. Secondly, for years, I want to point out that organizations like Heart of America Northwest had an alternate of a college or graduate student. And then we were unable to continue doing that because the Energy Department unilaterally said, we will only support one person traveling for regional organizations. And secondly, when we did try to appoint an alternate, it took so damn long that they graduated from law school and School of Public Health by the time you got around to appointing them. And one of them, who was a law student, said, I'm going to work in the Tri-Cities, but I can't get time off from work to participate 3 days a week, 3 days a month. Other boards that I work with around this region or across the nation that have a commitment to equity do pay organizations a stipend and do pay for travel. You chose not to pay for travel. You chose to limit our ability to participate. And if you want us to be able to participate and to increase diversity, all you have to do is say, we'll do what the EPA does for a number of other regional Superfund site advisory boards and other agencies do. We will pay for the travel and a stipend for people who need a stipend, or we will reimburse the organization for a small stipend to make participation possible. But it's the regional environmental groups and regional health concern groups and universities that have the burden entirely on them of the cost of diversity and travel, not the local governments, not the business organizations from the Tri-Cities. And I just got to say, really? You're not going to say to business community organizations, you should be responsible for diversity goals, so you should have, where it is much more easy to have someone participate, you're not going to be responsible for meeting diversity goals or for local governments? Shame on you. Really. So there are some things you could do very easily. You have to make a commitment. And anyone who knows in government, and if you're going to commit to diversity, you got to spend a little money. And if you don't spend a little money, don't say that you've got a commitment to diversity. You've gutted the board's budget. You've prevented us from being able to continue with the diversity efforts we have. I will say, my organization, one of the youngest members of the board is our primary member, a former Spokane City Council member. We're the only organization that has representation from Spokane on it, the largest downwind city in the region, with great interest, a diverse, very diverse city. You don't have an effort to reach out and say, let's add someone from the city of Spokane. Or, and what I'm hearing is not having an interest in having WSU and UW continue, which also strive to have those interests represented as regional universities. So if you want to do this, commit to a representational board. Number one, honor that commitment. That was the commitment, a representational board. And then give us the resources and goals for increasing our diversity as a representational board. Third, yes, increase seats to recognize that the original makeup of this board might have had some biases in terms of not including some of the most impacted and hard to represent populations in the region, such as Mattawa and the Port of Mattawa, or the Wahluke School District, or Spokane. Otherwise, what I see as the alternative is, with your unilateral effort to change this, asking the state to go back to when we had our own state advisory board. No reason we shouldn't do it. We could probably do it better, and if you didn't want to take the advice, shame on you. But that's the alternative. I'd be glad to talk further with you about those suggestions, but I think you need to really think about them. And also, the final thing is this. Think about the image of you choosing. The Energy Department getting to choose its own advisors. What a joke for the Hanford site. Shame on you.
Right. I want to take a quick look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got about 10 folks on the phone. Is there anybody on the phone who wants to ask a question or share an idea? Okay, didn't want to leave our phone folks out. I've got Shelley, Marissa, Liz, and Dan Strom in queue. Thank you so much for waiting. I know it's a longer than normal queue. Shelley?
Oh, there we go. Thanks, Ruth. I appreciate it. Thanks to everybody. And I'm not going to say too much right now because I think we have got to, I really hope, Carrie and Kelly, that we can continue this conversation. When I look at the numbers, the number crunching of 15 organizations that don't have to, that can put anyone in the seat, right there, you've got, a primary and an alternate, and that's 30 people that could all potentially be male. And that would be their choice, or female, or whatever. So I'm not sure how you're ever going to meet your quotas, whatever your quota is, for the ratios of participation that you're aiming for. I think already the way this is being looked at doesn't pencil in at all. And I don't hear at all a nod, not even a nod, to institutional knowledge and how important institutional knowledge is to this site. Rob's impassioned discussion of institutional knowledge and having people on who really understand over time what has been the history of this site, and utilizing that and moving forward, how important that is. This site will be all by itself at some point, and it will be a regional issue, and we'll be lucky. We'll be duking it out in Washington, D.C., looking for money as the only site that still needs cleanup. We're the longest. And the enormity of the lift of the cleanup here just can't be denied. And if we don't think about what is important, which is institutional knowledge, in my opinion, and build a robust board and community that carries that knowledge forward, that can work as a community as such within this vessel of the Hanford Advisory Board to lobby for the monies that we're going to need in the future. I think that will be a tremendous oversight. And I think it's something we all need to talk about more. I want to understand how soon you're thinking of implementing some of this. It feels very piecemeal at this point. And I'm a little I'm really concerned about the domino of if this, then that. I'd like to understand a lot more things about how many people roll off the board in the next year who carry institutional knowledge? And I think that I have a lot more questions than answers than you can answer right now. So I'd like to understand process-wise, most importantly, this decision matrix and what it would look like. And I'd like to see it on paper. I'd like us to be able to look at it and understand what it means. So.
Shelley, I
Okay.
can't say that a lot of the local aspects of this are going to be, locally decided, if that makes sense. How you guys are going to work your internal process, and the nominations and getting applicants from multiple organizations. Those are things that are locally going to have to be decided. And I know that the site has been thinking about it, but that's not some type of procedure that headquarters is going to dictate. We take over the responsibility once the slate of candidates based on the agreed upon framework for the board is sent up to headquarters. So not that we're not working together. I just want to point out that a lot of this has to be worked at the local level with the board, with the various people involved in the tri-party agreement and that aspects. Regarding when this goes into effect, the next package that you guys submit to us requesting appointments needs to fall within this guidance, because we have been directed with that executive order to implement it immediately. And so the packages that we have received from other boards since the June executive order have had to fall underneath this. And so in terms of timing, you wanted to know when it goes into effect, and it goes into effect when we receive your next package. Essentially, it's in effect now, but for you, since you don't have a package, it goes into effect when you submit the package.
And this is Carrie. I would add that, Shelley, as I mentioned earlier, this is a discussion that we want to have with the board. We're going to have it sooner rather than later in regards to the goals that we want to set. I hear what you're saying regarding the impact from the 15 or the 12 standing seats. And so we'll have to consider that as well. I will get with Gary after this meeting, and we'll look at the process flow chart as well for the approvals, and set up time to go over all of that with the board.
So you're anticipating that's going to happen within the next month?
Absolutely, yes.
These discussions. And I know if everybody who's on the call realizes I am probably the longest lived member of this board. I've been on since before its inception, in a way. I was one of the people that was asked to I was interviewed for the convening report. So I've been at it a long time. And so maybe it is time for me to step back. But I do, in a very impassioned way, realize that we cannot pull informed advice out of thin air, and that it takes the technical expertise of our committee members and board members to help us understand to the best that we can what we need to weigh in on, and then the whole hashing out of bringing advice to a public policy level, which happens in committee and in the full board with many, many people who are not, like me, technically trained as geologists, hydrologists, engineers, and on, and have to depend on and listen to and think about what is important policy-wise to bring to the discussions of remediation and disposition of this material. So I don't believe that it isn't important. I think it's very important for us to have people like Rob and Vince Pinesco, and on and on and on, to help us sort through and give informed advice. So I want that to be considered. And I look forward to the discussion. So thank you. That's it for now.
All right, Marissa and then Esteban. Marissa, thank you for waiting.
See, I just had I think I have 3 comments, but a quick one first for Kelly. You said you went to fraternities and sororities, well, just fraternities, and they're notorious for lacking diversity. But I want to point out that there are a lot of groups who might be very interested and who are passionate and have joined groups. There's Native American student groups, Chicano Latino, some water quality, environmental engineering. I mean, the list goes on, environmental justice, who are doing it because they're passionate and not because they have to do community service hours. So that's my one comment on that. And then my other for Carrie, you say we have to limit the technical discussion, but we're reading hundreds and thousands of pages of technical documents that the DOE puts out, and I don't know how we're supposed to separate the two. You want us to comment on an RIFS or whatnot? Well, it's all technical. It's almost all technical. And I think I'm speaking for our department in this, like the DOE is more trying to dictate the discussion, direct the discussion. And within the 3 years that I've been on this board, I feel, and I'm speaking to the department, I actually got permission on this, that we have felt more ostracized. So when you're considering diversity, that might be something that you also want to consider. Thank you.
All right. Esteban and then Liz. Esteban?
All right, well, as a Mexican-American male and new to this area, the first thing I'd like to say that I've heard, and especially that I think Washington State is rich of, that DOE, first of all, doesn't even recognize the native lands we're on. And second, to that gentleman from Pasco who said technical difficulties, as a person who's worked for a nonprofit organization as in a diverse, I heard that argument that white folks are superior in intelligence to diverse folks. So answer me that with your technical questions. That supposedly the whole argument of the superior race. I thought we were supposed to pass, and as a military veteran, I'm insulted by those comments by that individual to hear that about technicalities. You know, because I've been told that I'm an inferior race because of my color, my skin, and my culture. You people really are, this is sickening to hear this, especially from a federal agency. This is a freaking insult, and at this point, I don't even want to serve on this board because if you people want to hear scientists are the most racist people because I've worked with them, believe me. And in this, and me living in Richland, you know, first of all, second, you know, the diversity among PNNL and any energy, any federal, you know, DOE, EPA, you name it, there's a lack of diversity within this, not only within those agencies, but everywhere. So, I mean, first of all, please recognize first the land you're on, and second, there's no outreach done to Spanish-speaking communities out here. Because believe me, they know, they're aware, but second, they're not going to speak up. And this whole technical difficulty, technical crap, might as well say that, you know, there's an inferior race out there. I'm done.
Esteban, this is Carrie. And so I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. And maybe I need to just follow up with you. Are you saying that somebody on either the board or with one of the agencies has said or done something to make you feel inferior?
Comment that was just made that apparently you need to have technical, you know, this gentleman, I think he's from Pasco, I forget his name, said that you need to have technical know-how to serve on this board. Come on, people can read. I mean, I've done outreach with the Hanford, you know, with a nonprofit out here at the flea market in Pasco. People are aware, but second, you know, people have jobs that are not aware. But I mean, to make that argument that you need to have technical know-how to serve on this board, might as well. That's what I'm saying. Might as everybody, and I believe this comment, this meeting has been recorded, and he said it right there. And you could say I wrote it in the comment that he's obviously wrong, because he might as well send that this is a superior race, because that's the arguments I heard, especially from scientists, that I've had to challenge in nonprofits I work for, especially science nonprofits.
Carrie,
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, we can go back to both the recording and the transcript to clarify what was or was not said.
Well, and that's fine. Regardless of what was or was not said, I wanted to make sure I understood where Esteban was coming from and his perspective. And I wanted to clarify that this, and I said it earlier, this is not a technical advisory board, okay? The general public should, the general public is well qualified to understand how we do the work and the technologies that we employ. And that's what I was trying to get at earlier. It is on us, the Department of Energy and its contractors, as well as EPA and ecology, to make sure that we are providing, I'll say, the right level of briefing that will allow our board members to be informed in crafting their advice. And that is something that we have struggled with, is how much technical detail is necessary to do that. And I'm at a little bit of a quandary, because on the one hand, I feel like the department is getting lambasted because we don't provide enough technical documentation. But Esteban is not the only one who has brought this forward. And I have shared with this board on multiple occasions that, we have local entities who are discouraged because they feel the board wants to go down rabbit trails that are not relevant to what needs to be done to achieve the cleanup. They want to get too technical, or they want to be focused on their own perspectives, and to the extent that they inhibit others. And that's why I wanted to ask Esteban, because to be frank, I'm not sure that I've heard many people speak up about it publicly like I just heard him do. Usually they come to me behind the door and say, this is my concern. And I don't want to bring it up in the board, because I'm going to be crucified by those who don't agree until I just stop and give in. So thanks.
So tag on to what Carrie just said, I do want to point out on the application that every member is asked to fill out in order to be appointed. It does say on there, please note that a degree, certification, or technical background is not required for board membership, and members with different educational backgrounds all contribute to a diversity of opinions and experiences. So just, I want to make sure everybody understands we do not require a technical background. In fact, we like to have a diverse background so that we hear a variety of viewpoints.
Right. Liz, and then Dan Strom. Liz? Oh, hang on a sec, Liz. Stan, do you need to speak to this issue? I saw your hand.
Stan, I was just going to echo. Yes, I was just going to echo with what Kelly and Carrie said. We want to ensure that the board is diverse and demographic, region-wide. So that way, when we do reach out to those in the area, we want to make sure that we have the candidates that are non-degreed or bachelor's or master's, as well as male, female population, et cetera. So we want to make sure that we have the diversity. As Kelly indicated, the board is not designed and set up for technical people, staff only. It's for a diverse makeup. So, and we want to ensure that we provide information at such a level where anyone on the board can understand what information is being provided and be able to make relatively informed decisions from that. Thank you.
Gary Younger, I saw a hand.
Certainly, I do appreciate it. And I also want to echo what, respond to one of Esteban's questions about outreach to the Hispanic community. And we have recognized that, and we're working to do a better job, which is why we specifically targeted trying to add Hispanics in our last board. And thankfully, you were one of those who was able to raise your hand. The other part is that we've recognized that we could do better at sending out information. So we have begun adding some of our news releases and things like that also in Spanish to reach the Hispanic community. We're not perfect. We recognize we have a long way to go, but it's because of people like you stepping up and wanting to be part of the solution that will help us get a little bit further down the road. Over.
All right. Liz, thank you for waiting. I've got Liz, Dan, and Chris. Liz?
Yeah, thank you. And I also want to echo, or at least just say on my own, Esteban, that I appreciate you being on the board and voicing your concerns. And I hope that you don't leave the board, but I also respect your decision to take care of yourself also. It seems like there's a lot going on in this meeting, and I think we're going to need more time to process as a group. And I think most of where I hear the distrust, I just hear a lot of distrust and panic, and in a lot of the comments and reactions on all sides today, with how this is, how this is actually going to come together in a month. Knowing that there is a lot of conflict between the board and DOE on a lot of issues, and then having this come out as essentially cleaning out a lot of really active board members from the board, with what I do think there is noble intent, or that it is a good thing to bring racial and ethnic and gender and age diversity to the board. And it needs to be done in a thoughtful way. And it also, I think, needs to be done in a way that's looking at the entire picture of public involvement at Hanford, and not just the Hanford Advisory Board. It's been something that the HAB has been asking for a long time, is meaningful regional public engagement, and we're just not seeing it. So I feel like I have a bit of I just don't totally trust this process is going to solve any problem. It does seem like it's just going to be a check the box, and that's where I have hesitation, instead of it being a longer, more thought out process that's really involving the board. That's something that's, and I do appreciate that Carrie initiated a meeting to talk with us about this, and it didn't just happen as a memo. But I do think there's some more steps to figuring out what this means for all these groups that have been identified as a specific interest group, when I really do see all of the seats on the board as representing an interest. So I feel like that's not, it's a frustrating interpretation. And I do agree that there's a need to bring more gender, racial, ethnic, age diversity to the board, and have us evolve for the long time frame that NEP requires. And I am still a little unclear about who is deciding who the nominating authorities would be for these specified interest groups. So for example, for Hanford Challenge, we nominate people to fill our seats. We are already planning, before any of this came out, to nominate 2 new young people to the board. So in that example is DOE, Ecology, EPA, and I would hope the Executive Issues Committee would be involved in this, looking at, well, do we want Hanford Challenge on the board anymore? Well, maybe we need to cast the net and see what other groups exist that are focusing all of their energy and resources on the Hanford cleanup. And that, like, the process just feels very unclear to me. Or are you, yeah, anyway, if you could provide some more information about that, or maybe some of the next steps you're looking at, I would really appreciate
Yeah, I can address that, Liz. So the intent is to cast the net wide every year to see what response we get. And to be frank, I think we have been doing that, or we've been trying to do that for a number of years. Last year, we cast it wider, identifying where we were really lacking and focusing on organizations, entities, agencies that may have the demographics that we needed. So this year, we will do the same thing. And when we get those nominations in, we would review them with the tri-party agencies. Now, I don't know that we've ever discussed discussing them with the EIC. So I'll have to talk with the TPA agencies. But ultimately, this is how it has worked for years. And it's how we, right now foresee it continuing.
Dan Strom, you had a suggestion that you sent via email. Do you want to share that with the full group?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, I hope Esteban finds a way to stay on the board. So Carrie and Kelly, you mentioned timely appointments, and the email appointing me to the HAB was sent on October 6, 2020, and it went to my spam folder because it was sent by someone I'd never heard of. Now, I was told in 2020 to start looking for an appointment to the HAB in June, but July, August, September went by, and I wasn't even looking. I was getting stuff from the HAB, but I assumed I wasn't on the board. So that email went to my spam folder, and I found it 2 months later after the December 2020 HAB meeting. So I missed 2 HAB meetings in the fall of 2019. So please have Hanford Advisory Board appointment emails sent or forwarded by somebody we've previously emailed with. In my case, that would have been Dana Gribble from DOE-RL. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for that. This is Carrie again. I would also add that as we look at our process manuals, perhaps we consider a phone call as well, rather than just relying on email. So my apologies that we did not follow up with you sooner.
All right. Chris Sutton, thank you for waiting. It's on your mind.
Yes. I don't have a question. I guess I have a comment or a suggestion. In listening to a lot of the comments and questions over the last hour, one of the things that's occurred to me is I wonder if the HAB couldn't form another committee, and for lack of a better term right now, call it a mentorship committee, where this could be composed either of current members or members who are rotating off, who have a lot of technical knowledge about Hanford, institutional knowledge about Hanford, maybe technical knowledge about RECRA, CERCLA, other type of things, who have been perhaps longtime board members, who could volunteer their time to serve as mentors or to give advice, if required, to new members coming on, especially new members who maybe haven't worked at Hanford, who might not be up with technical things necessary to formulate good policy advice, who maybe don't know how the board works and are hesitant to ask questions at board meetings in front of a lot of people. But if they had a list of names of people they could go to ask questions about anything, maybe this could help alleviate some of the concerns that we've heard about losing institutional knowledge, about technical knowledge, about advice for new members, and so on and so forth. And it could be formalized, I think, as a mentorship committee, or call it something else, but just a repository of people who are willing to volunteer their time to help other members, especially new members on the board.
Right.
Appreciate that, Chris. And it is definitely an interesting idea. So we will discuss that. Thank you.
All right, we are coming up right on our planned adjourn time, but I don't want to cut you off yet. Liz, you're in queue, and then I'm going to kick it to Steve Wigman. Liz?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. I forgot to say this earlier. I think part of institutional knowledge is also having time to train people and build community. And also, to Chris's idea of building some kind of mentorship, something we've been trying to do forever. And when you're in person, there's a lot more space to do that. But it also requires individuals on the board reaching out to new people and building those relationships and taking the time to get to know people and include them, so that there isn't this gap in, like, I'm attending meetings, I don't really know what's going on, and really not, it takes some time. So for the person that we're on the intro with me, if whether or not that, this new process allows that, I've been working with her, and we have a plan for a year to work together to get her ready and know the board. So when she jumps in, she knows what's going on and is able to hit the ground running. So just like keeping in mind that there's a lot that goes behind being on this board and being prepared to participate in a way that feels meaningful for the person who's joining and is accessible. So you're not just not understanding what's going on and then not able to keep going. I was also wondering if it's possible to hear from Ecology EPA now that they've been able to hear, and maybe that was the plan at the end. I'm not sure. Thanks.
Did you? All right, let's move to Marissa and Steve. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Who are you looking for?
Okay, I was looking for Liz. Okay, I just muted everything to clear out the background noise here. So Liz, if you need an answer, give me a clue in the chat. Let me go to Marissa and then Steve Anderson. Marissa?
It's kind of in response to Esteban. As a scientist with Nez tribe, I want to make sure that that I don't come across. I don't know, that I can make information if I'm talking about anything understandable or anything to everybody, and I'd hope that I could get feedback. And then also Christy Baptiste is our policy analyst. And I don't want to. Anyway, I'm losing my words. Thank you.
Right. Steve Anderson, and then I want to loop back to the regulators for Liz. Steve? Steve Anderson, are you with us? I had you in queue. There you are.
Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Along the same lines, I feel like I just need to reach out to Esteban and apologize as an old white male. I completely agree. I think the caste system in this country is abhorring, and please stick with us. We can get better than we've been, and I appreciate your comments. Thanks.
Okay. So Liz, I want you to repeat your question so Ecology and EPA can be reminded of it. And Tom Galeotto, I'm going to ask about board business after we do that. Liz?
Yeah, and sorry, I couldn't hear you earlier. With the background, it was hard to understand what you were saying. I was just wondering if Ecology and EPA could share any reflections they have after hearing the discussion with the board and DOE today.
Thanks, Liz. This is David at Ecology. I can start off, and I think the comments I heard reflected a lot of what my concerns were that I expressed at the beginning. We need to engage a diverse group of folks. We need to think about the future and 20, 30, 40 years out, making sure that people are informed and interested and engaged. I think, Esteban's observations, being one of those white males who, yes, I worked my butt off to get where I am, but I didn't have near the hurdles to jump over that other people have. And I've witnessed it myself for people I really care about. And so I hear you, and I'm hoping that you'll stick with us and we'll work forward with that. I need to take this conversation back to Ecology headquarters and talk it over with my team and all that. And I do want to address what Carrie mentioned earlier. Yes, we've been talking about different topics probably since late November, off and on what comes forward. And as in my opening comments, I mentioned I was really pleased with the fact that there is still a mechanism for an exemption if it gets to that point. I really like the idea of a mentorship. It's something that I'm working on here at Ecology to do the same thing, to get the information transferred to folks who are going to take over for us. I've got probably 4 to 6 years in this seat, and then somebody else has got to do it, and I'm sure hoping I lay the right path for them. So I think I'll stop there.
Dave Enan, do you have anything to add?
I'll try and keep it brief again, but echo a lot of what David said, but there's a lot that came out today that I think we need to spend a lot of time with. Some of the things that Esteban said and that Jerry brought up and Rob brought up, those are all. And I think the question of diversity of thought versus diversity of thoughts and experience versus things that are really easy to check the box on, right? I think we need all of that because we do so much better when we hear from all the voices. And these are tough conversations, but I would much rather have the tough conversations than the check the box ones, because those are the ones that are important. And everybody, all of you are too busy to talk to waste time checking the boxes. So thank you. We've clearly got a lot of work to do.
Thank you. So Tom, you're asking about board business. I will confess I put in board business because I wasn't sure how the meeting was going to go and what needed to happen next. So there's nothing in my head specifically about that item. If Steve, you, Tom, or anyone else has board business we need to tackle, this is where you need to clue us in as to what we need to do. Tom Galeotto.
Well, thank you, Ruth. And maybe as a happy diversion, this comment on board business has nothing at all to do with the recruitment package or any of the issues that we've been talking about that have been so serious today. My comment on board business is we really need as a priority to get back to scheduling committee reports on every HAB meeting. If we have a full HAB meeting, we need to have an agenda item and we need to conduct the discussion on committee business. We lose so much by not having the committee reports because that's about the only tie that many of our members have with what else is going on beyond what they're already working on themselves. So I really encourage us to not only put committee reports on the board agenda each time, but also to actually conduct that period of time and give it sufficient time for a discussion. Thank you.
Steve Wigman, we're a little bit into overtime. Oh, Gary. You're off the hook for a minute, Steve. Gary?
Yes, one of the things that we had been discussing is that we're looking for budget cleanup advice in the very near future. And the BCC typically helps to manage that. And what we need to do is have that particular IM team sanctioned so that they can go on and begin their work. I just want to throw that out. I'm not telling anybody to do it. I'm just trying to jog some memories.
So Gary, that's actually item number 1 on the agenda for the EIC call at 2:30 today.
I'm standing down.
So we make sure that by the end of the day, we have an IM team for that piece of advice. Steve Wigman.
Where to begin? This has been quite a conversation. I think we're all very interested in what the next steps are. I would just like to comment on Esteban's concerns, and I hear you very strongly. I think the institutional knowledge that a lot of us bring also brings a little bit of arrogance and a little bit of self-realization when we get an opportunity to speak and we overwhelm other people's opportunity to speak. So I would challenge all of those who have a sense of long-term institutional knowledge to be a little quieter and listen a lot more. And I think Esteban would be a good barometer of our success. And I would hope, Esteban, that you will stay with us and keep providing that barometer, because I respect what you're saying and I hear you, and I'm asking everybody to hear you. That's going to be very important. And of course, we're all interested in what happens next. You know, we're a dynamic board, we're in a dynamic time, and we want to mature ourselves so that we can survive all the challenges that come to us in the future. And we've got a lot of work to do, obviously. And one of the most important things that we all need to do is listen to each other and respect each other and realize that this board represents such diverse views that it's very, very difficult to get a consensus out of that when you've got so many different perspectives, some of which you're not even hearing because we overwhelm people. So we need to really focus on inclusion and integrity in the way we operate. And hopefully we can work with DOE on this next package in a way that turns people on to participating in this process. Over.
All right. With that, I think we're at the end of this meeting and can get ready for the next one.
I will need email notification of the next meeting. I can't find it anywhere.
Okay, we'll get that to you.
Okay.
EIC public comment. Thank you, Jeff. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm embarrassed. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to share a thought or an idea with us at this time? Anyone? Stan Branch, you've got your hand up.
Did you call on me, Ruth?
Yes, I did.
Oh, great. Thank you. Just basically want to state and reiterate, there's the question and comment keeps coming up regarding acknowledging land acknowledgement for tribal members. And basically, the department recognizes that the tribes and treaty rights and has the specific programs in place to engage and consult with the tribes. So the HAB is not the mechanism and is not intended to raise any group or community, above another, but to provide, affected communities with an opportunity to share their views and perspectives and opinions. So just wanted to make sure that everyone, is aware of that and know that. So I know it's come up a number of times, so we just wanted to address that there are mechanisms in place to address that. And the HAB is not that mechanism. Thanks.
All right. Phil Lemley, do you want to share your idea with the folks on the phone? I know you typed it into chat, but our phone folks can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, as I said in the chat there, I think it's important to have both expertise, which we have a lot of, and then complete novices, because typically if a novice is very outgoing, they're going to ask the whole issue about there is no dumb question, I think raises its ugly head here. And they would ask questions that the rest of us, I'm no expert by any means, that the rest of us assume that everyone knows about or everyone is thinking about. But they'll ask a question out of the blue sometimes that will get everyone thinking and make everyone explain it a little bit more where everyone can understand it, even maybe sometimes the experts.
Thank you, Phil. All right. Let me see. Hands. Check. With that, I'm going to suggest we adjourn. If you're on the EIC, you've got 45 minutes till your next conversation. For the rest of you, thank you so much for your time. Carrie?
Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you.
All right. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Josh or the facilitation team or me, and we will do our best to get you an answer. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.